Let's talk NBA because that's what I brought you in for. And let's start with the big move, the big trade that's already gone down. Kyrie Irving is going to be a Dallas Maverick. Your thoughts on, first and foremost, what does this do to the landscape of the West and the NBA? What does this, we'll get to what it means for the teams, but talk about what this does overall to the landscape of the NBA.
Well, I think, Barry, in a very balanced Western Conference, it gives the Mavericks a chance. It gives the Mavericks a chance because before this, they were constantly looking from Porzingis to all the options they tried. They were trying to get a running mate for Luka because we all know it's ideal in a luxury if you have a three-headed monster of stars. But the best case scenario to win a championship is you have to have two. And I don't think that the Mavs clearly had two. And what they gave up, in my opinion, was not nearly what I thought you were going to have to give up for Kyrie Irving. So you went from a team that was going to probably be a very good regular season team because of Luka that probably had little to no chance of winning the championship. When you talk about the other teams in the West, they would have had to leapfrog. Now, of course, there's all kinds of questions about like 2 point guards on the same team, both ball dominant guys like Kyrie and Luka, and their usage rate are the two highest in the league. How's that all going to translate? Well, that's for them to figure out. But if they do figure it out, now Mark Cuban and the Mavericks have to be mentioned in the same breath as any team you think might win the West, as opposed to a team that looks good on paper, good in the regular season, probably not going to see the time of day in a conference championship or a title.
And, I think is interesting is Cuban strikes me as the kind of owner that will put up with more of Kyrie Irving's bullshit than a lot of the other owners in the league, right? Cuban's a little more eccentric. Kyrie's more eccentric. So maybe that bodes well for Kyrie. And I'm with you. I think it's good. It is going to be different, but having two ball dominant players like Kyrie and Luka, I was saying years ago when Dame was looking at getting out of Portland that would have been a good mix. So I'm not opposed to Kyrie going to Dallas. I think they'll figure it out and make it work. The question is, how much will Kyrie actually play for the Mavs?
Yeah, well, first of all, here's the thing. He's playing for his next contract. So that's the motivation that I don't think the Nets really felt like they ever got, which is he has to play nice, he has to do the right things, and he has to act the appropriate way. From what I heard, they were talking negotiations on an extension. And similarly to what the Rockets, if you follow what the Rockets did recently with Kevin Porter Jr., they put a whole bunch of clauses in for behavior. Well, I think rightfully so, the Nets were trying to do the same thing. Kyrie and his camp didn't like it. They exercised their right to ask for a trade, and I thought they did it only as a bargaining chip just because they wanted to kind of not be forced to sign a contract with those things in it, thinking the Nets would say, okay, fine, we'll take those out. We can continue to talk. Instead, the Nets said, hey, by the way, do us a favor. Stay away until we trade you. These talks are over. And I think it caught their camp off guard. They didn't know where they were going to end up going. And then to show you just how personal it was, Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets, said the one place he's not going to is the one place he wants to go, and said, we will not trade him to the Lakers even if we get a better deal because we're not going to appease this dude. And that means it was personal.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's interesting. That's really interesting. So if you didn't hear, the trade is the Mavs get Kyrie Irving and Markieff Morris plus a second round pick, which I think it was 2 second round picks, but one of them is a pick swap, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's 2-year pick swaps, 2027 and 2029 second round pick swaps. Brooklyn gets Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and an unprotected 2029 first round pick. Who won this trade? Or if you were going to give it grades, what do you give both sides? Was this a win-win, or did somebody come out on the better side?
I think Brooklyn lost. I think Brooklyn lost because they now, you think about the money they've tied up and what their big three was supposed to be. Well, it was supposed to be, Ben Simmons as almost a luxury third option with two bona fide stud superstar scorers in KD and Kyrie. Well, if you're going to trade Kyrie, your hope is you get another kind of a along the same lines of a superstar type player.
Yeah.
And instead, they're stuck. Look, Spencer Dinwiddie's a good player, but Spencer Dinwiddie is not a difference maker in a playoff series and a championship run. I think that Dallas giving up a Finney-Smith, they still have Hardaway Jr. They're essentially the same player, so they don't lose a whole lot. And the scoring that you lost with Dinwiddie, you make up for and then some with Kyrie. I think Dallas won the trade because if things don't work out, the contract expires at the end of the year. Kyrie walks away. You've got max money to play with under your salary cap to go get another option for Luka, and you don't have the constraints you had with the contracts that were currently on your roster. From a Brooklyn standpoint, I give it a C plus. I know the Clippers were interested, the Suns were interested. Like, if you're going to make one last run, right, and you're going to keep Kevin Durant, wouldn't you rather have had Chris Paul along with other sweeteners like Jay Crowder, who's a tough-nosed playoff type guy, three-point shooter, and know that that's a better option for the playoffs with Kevin Durant and Ben Simmons than Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith? I mean, I understand the marquee aspect is one thing. Just on the floor, I don't see how Brooklyn feels like they can look at themselves in the eye and say, we won this trade with the other teams that were willing to throw bigger pieces at you.
And the unprotected first isn't going to, I mean, that's the Mavs aren't going to be a lottery team, especially adding Kyrie if he plays at all. Right. Now, that's going to be 2 years from now, so who knows? But, I mean, you got to think as long as Luka's there, this is a playoff team, so you're not even going to get a lottery-type pick out of that. Now, you mentioned Ben Simmons, and that's kind of a side note to all of this, I guess, in a way, but I saw something, Nick Friedel, I think is how you pronounce it, from ESPN.
Friedel.
Yep, Friedel. He basically said that there was somebody talking that said Ben Simmons, quote, has no trade value around the league right now. Do you believe that?
Totally believe it, Barry. I've never seen this before in my life, and I played basketball with you. You're horrible, and yet there is not a single shot on this planet, if given the opportunity, that you wouldn't shoot. Or if a guy laid off of you and said, I dare you.
Yeah.
Well, you know, where you lack in certain areas, you've got big cajones. You're not going to back down. You're going to shoot the ball.
Yeah.
I've never in my life seen a pro player pass up layups and dunks and any shot he could possibly take. And let me say this. He's really good at every other aspect of the game. Passing, rebounding, defense, ball handling. He could do all those things. But if you're terrified to shoot the ball, that's a no-win proposition in the NBA. Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people in the NBA tell me the same thing that I've said all along, which is if you're paying Ben Simmons Eric Gordon type money or $15 million a year, he's a valuable piece that you cannot do without. If you're paying him max money, you are getting taken to the dry cleaners with extra starch. That's how bad that move is. So I understand that no one wants to take on Ben Simmons because no one wants that contract attached to him. And that's a big problem if you're the Nets.
Yeah, you can't blame him. And Dick Willie in the chat says is the Nets GM working for the Rockets? It's good news if you're a Rockets fan because they have their picks for the next couple of years.
It's definitely a win for the Rockets because, like you said, look, we can't predict the future. Luka could sprain an ankle, blow a knee, do something to where in one season that pick could be hyper valuable. There's a lot of red Kool-Aid drinking Rockets fans that still believe all those Nets are magically in the blink of an eye going to become lottery picks. Chances are it's probably not going to happen. But in the meantime, you can dream, and at least you have draft capital that you can package if you want to make trades, move up, do those things. But from what was given up from both sides, the Rockets are the team sitting there on the sideline laughing, going, well, now there's rumors that before the deadline, they may shop Kevin Durant. If they move Durant too, now if you're the Rockets, your eyes get very wide going, hey, you know what that means? That means for the next couple years, not this year, but the following 2 years when you have their first round pick, if they take a step back, you take a step forward. That's pretty good.
Yeah, especially if they commit to a rebuild. And do you think that they trade? Do you think the Nets, after moving Kyrie, say, you know what, forget it? I mean, there's no more James Harden. There's no more Kyrie Irving. Will the Nets trade Kevin Durant?
I don't think they want to, but I think that becomes a conversation you have to have with Kevin Durant and say, are you willing to stick it out through the end of this year and see what we can do for you? If you're not, or if you are going to press the issue, which he did once before in the offseason and said, I want out, then he changed his mind. That's going to determine everything else you do. Because if he tells me now he wants out, not only is Kevin Durant on the table, but I'm putting Curry's little brother on the table. I am putting Patty Mills on the table. I'm putting all of my veterans that I brought in to make this team a championship caliber team. And I'm saying we're taking the best offer like a yard sale because we're starting over. Yeah. Now, the one that makes sense, but some people are kiboshing, was Kevin Durant for Jalen Brown. He goes to the Celtics. Jalen Brown gets a chance to spread his wings with if you're the Nets and you're rebuilding a little bit, that's a guy you build around because he's been limited playing alongside and sometimes behind Tatum. That makes a lot of sense if you can get that caliber of talent and maybe more for Durant. If you can't, then I don't see how you make that move.
Yeah, it's gonna be. It's almost like who would have thought that you would look at the Nets kind of like you look at anybody holding a Russell Westbrook contract, where you're like, well, now what? He doesn't want to be there, but who are you going to be able to trade for, and how are you going to be able to move that guy? And it ain't going to be for Russ. They would never do that. But yeah, it's going to make it interesting.
Yeah. The thing, if they were doing complete rebuild, you do the Lakers trade, you take Russ, you do the buyout because KD and Russ are never going to play together again.
No.
But then you realize at the end of the year, I've got all this massive amounts of money to go get and pick whoever my next franchise player could be in free agency or build around. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, if you're a Phoenix, how do you go on if you're Chris Paul? You were thrown into the Kyrie trade.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, now you're being rumored to be thrown into a Kevin Durant trade if they still want a point guard. And you're going, look, man, I understand I'm making a lot of money, but I'm the reason why, along with Devin Booker, we made a run 2 years ago. And if we're healthy, we maybe could make a run again. And now you're just throwing me out in every deal possible to get rid of me. I mean, if I'm Chris Paul, I'm not too happy either. And I might want to go talk to the Suns management and say, hey, then look, just get me out of here somewhere else. Send me to the Lakers for Russ. There's the trade that could make some sense. Send me with my boy LeBron. I'm way better offensively than Westbrook. Westbrook's free at the end of the year anyway, so Phoenix gets out from Chris Paul's multiple years. We just made a deal right here, Barry.
I like it. It makes sense.
We send Chris Paul to the Lakers.
Yeah.
The Lakers are better. You send Westbrook to the Suns. He still gets his money. He walks away a free agent at the end of the year, and Phoenix gets out from multiple years of Chris Paul that they don't want to pay.
And they have the room to go sign another piece to play alongside.
If I see any of these other blowhards nationally break our story, they can go back and you're going to have to cut this, paste this, and stick it to them.
That's it.
We just came up with a hot stove deal.
As soon as this show's over with today, I'm going to chop this up and I'm going to put it on the internet so nobody can claim what you just said.
Take your trade tracker and shove it. We got this one done.
You know what you mentioned, and I mean that was literally going to be one of my questions. What do the Suns do now? Chris Paul, is he disgruntled? So that answers that. Titan Hugo has a question for you before we move on from the Nets, and he wanted to know: is this the biggest failed Big Three team of all time in the NBA? The Nets.
I don't know about biggest. It's up there. There was just way too much talent for this team not to have at least won one, and I'm not going to go to the LeBron, not one, not two, not three. Yeah. But you remember that when the last time the Nets got desperate, when they had the Russian owner, he went nuts and he traded for Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, a combo platter of washed up Big Three, and that never amounted to anything either. Yeah. I hate Titan Hugo to remind you of the fact that the Rockets tried to take an over the hill Scottie Pippen, Clyde Drexler, Charles Barkley, Akeem Olajuwon combination that didn't work out so well either. Yeah. So there's a few, but this one definitely, because most of these guys were all in their prime.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that when you had Harden, and for everybody that I talked to, KD and Harden are still fine. But easy, Jackson Gatlin and Rockets guys. This isn't going to be the Rockets are going to trade for KD, then sign James Harden in free agency, and hello, championship. No, you're wrong. Okay? And you would be stupid to break up a young team. But Harden and Durant have no hard feelings. Harden wanted out because he couldn't deal with the antics of Kyrie Irving either. So it'll be interesting to see how everything plays out.
Who would have thought that it wouldn't be James Harden that was the guy that was causing problems in the locker room, off the court, and everywhere else? It was on a team. Right?
I wouldn't have, because I've experienced the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so speaking of the Rockets, let's do this. Is Eric Gordon going to be traded? And if so, what do you expect the Rockets to get for him, and where do you think that he'll go?
So let me say this. If he's not traded, Rafael Stone should be fired before the end of the year.
Ooh.
And that is because Rafael Stone had a deal on the table a year ago to get rid of Eric Gordon and thought he could get more, turned it down, didn't get more, went back to get more, couldn't, and the Suns were without Eric Gordon and the Rockets were left holding a guy that didn't want to be there. Now we're a year later. If you don't trade Eric Gordon, and at the end of the day, if it means for a bowl of soup, you do it because it's addition by subtraction. When Eric Gordon's on the floor, there's less shots for the young guys you need to see what they can do. When Eric Gordon is on the floor, there's less minutes for the guys that you need to see what they can do. And Eric Gordon in the locker room is a guy that doesn't want to be there. He wants to be with a winner. And so You would settle, in my opinion, for a second round pick at the very worst.
Gosh.
But at the end of the day, when you are getting close to the deadline, and I think they're going to have competition, right? I think Milwaukee, I think Phoenix, depending on what they do. I think that the Lakers are going to want to kick the tires. You're going to have some teams interested enough where I think you can get competition built up to where you can push that pick up a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you only have one, you have to take it because he has to be out the door. Otherwise, at the end of the season, he walks out the door for nothing. And you're left thinking about the what ifs and could have been, should have been, that at least you got something for him. He's not going to come back here no matter what. So take what you can get. Judge the market, start playing the game now. And by Thursday at the deadline, if you're close, take your best offer and cut ties.
See, I think this is the one area where I think this team and this organization misses Daryl Morey. He would have already pulled the trigger, because it's like you used to say on The Usual Suspects when we did it all the time back in the day, is that was the big knock on Daryl Morey, was that he looks at players as assets and not as people necessarily, but he was always moving and trading and getting deals done. And I think sometimes in the case of like a Rafael Stone, like you said, it could almost be a paralysis by analysis where you keep thinking you can do better. Just pull the trigger and get something done. So I think they would almost benefit from a guy like Daryl in this situation.
They really would, because one thing we know, whether it's Trader Daryl or not, and in my years working with him, the one thing we knew was he was going to make at least one deal. It was like he took pride in the fact that it was almost more important than whether it improved the roster or not. He was going to do something. And so that was exciting around trade deadline time. But when you have a good competitive team, his draft picks meant less. His assets meant more in terms of free agency, money to have veterans, things, and trades. So you look at that and you say, look, I heard all these people losing their minds last week when one of the Gordon trades proposed in a three-way included KJ Martin. And so, you know how many KJ Martins they have on the roster right now? I mean, Jayshawn Tate is KJ Martin. The kid they drafted from LSU is KJ Martin. And they have KJ Martin. So and how many games is that winning you? If it costs you KJ Martin and Eric Gordon, but you add an extra first and maybe a player or two that plays a different position, like maybe a true point guard that could help you now, do it. I don't understand this obsession. I said on the air the other day, the only two untradables in my mind are Şengün and Jalen Green. And other than that, if you make me the right offer, and miss me please on the Kevin Porter Jr. talk too, because he's not a point guard. He leads the league in turnovers if you're playing him there. Yeah. And he's a loose cannon. At a certain point, again, addition by subtraction, protect the guy that you're trying to make a superstar in Jalen Green, and don't force him to miss shots and opportunities. And by the way, let's also mention, it's a poorly coached team right now. Whereas you watch these young kids, and if one guy goes ISO on one possession, then one of the other two guys, Jabari or KPJ, is going ISO on the next. And whoever missed it on that opportunity is getting it on the third, and no one else is touching the ball. And that's not offense that wins games in the NBA.
What do you make of Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green missing games and the Rockets actually doing well? The ball doesn't, to borrow a term from your old pal and friend of the old Usual Suspects, Kevin McHale, the ball doesn't get sticky as much. And I don't remember who wrote about it, but it made a lot of sense. Alperen Şengün got to be kind of the pivot point for that offense. He got to be the distributor of the ball. He got to kind of be the point guard, and the offense looked good. It looked better than it has with Porter Jr. and Jalen Green on the floor. What do you make of that? Is there something to that?
Yeah, I think that it's a lot leading back to what I just told you, in the fact that KPJ's natural position isn't the point. And so I think ideally the best way to, if you're going to keep this team intact, the best way to be the most efficient would be obviously change the coach. And then secondly, get yourself a true point guard who's a distributor first. You play KPJ at the 2, you play Green at the 3, you play Jabari at the 4, and you play Şengün at the 5.
Gosh.
Then you can also go back to, and I've talked to McHale and Rudy and some of these guys about this. You go back to not every possession, mind you, but you go back to taking some of the best of what Rudy T did with Olajuwon. Now, some possessions, you let them play up tempo, attack the basket, put the ball in those guys' hands. Some possessions, you go more half court and you run through Şengün. If he scores the way he's capable of doing and they double down on him or they collapse, now everyone on your perimeter, surrounded with shooters, everybody's getting shots. Now no one bitches about, oh, I didn't get my shot, I didn't get my look. Everybody's going to get butt naked, wide open 3-point shots, and they
And he's
can be
going
a
to
better
find you.
team.
Yeah.
Right.
He's good.
So you hear more and more guys in this league, and Durant was one of them, and there's been several others that have said, Edwards from Minnesota said, how are they not running through Şengün most of their offense? It's a valid point and a concern. I think Steven Silas is a great dude. I know he's an NBA lifer. He didn't sign up for this team. He signed up for a team that had Russ and Harden. But what they're doing right now is a disservice to this roster because no one's getting the coaching they need to get better.
Who do you think would be a good fit for this team from a head coaching perspective that is a feasible option for this organization?
Off the cuff, the first time I was asked for it, and the more I think about it, the more I'm more adamant about it. Quinn Snyder is the right guy for this job. Quinn Snyder is a guy, and I know people that have worked with him that have. I threw it off them to see what they thought, and they were like, "No, that's a good call." Quinn Snyder was successful at the University of Missouri, coaching a bunch of kids. Quinn Snyder was also successful in Utah, taking young kids that were needed to be developed but had talent, like a Donovan Mitchell, and making them into getting as much as you could get out of that team. They didn't win a championship, but they were successful. Quinn Snyder could be the best of both worlds. And then when he walks in that locker room, instant credibility. This isn't his first go-round like Steven Silas. This isn't an 18-year assistant coach. It's a guy that's played at Duke under Coach K, won at Missouri, and then won with the Utah Jazz. When he walks in, I don't care what generation you are, you respect that man and realize he knows what he's talking about. And I think that's the kind of guy to take this team to the next level that they need. They need a guy that they have to respect, but also that understands how these younger generation of basketball players think, but what's the best situation offensively and defensively for me to get the most out of this team.
Lago Bot said Snyder's a hell of a coach. Yeah, his reputation is really good, right, around the league?
No question.
Yeah. All right, last thing. I know you got to go. I know you're a busy man. I'm enjoying the hell out of this, though. Just a general kind of question for NBA folks. Who should be buyers and who should be sellers at this NBA trade deadline, in your opinion?
Well, I think you mentioned it early on. The first one is LeBron. They got to get better. I think the deal that we proposed allows them to do so, but I don't know that they'd be done there. It's just they're limited in what they can give up, what most teams want, which is draft picks. They got 1 in 27 left and 1 in 29, and their roster is really not that good. The Clippers are trying to upgrade because they know they have the 2 stars. They've got some good pieces, but they want to get an extra 3rd star in there, and they're getting desperate, and they're competing not only with the Lakers, but their owner is basically putting a lot of pressure. They got to win now. So I would look at the Clippers and the Lakers in the West. Suns are going to be interesting. They could either be buyers or sellers. And like I said, if Chris Paul gets his dauber down, that's a sign that maybe something has to be done, not wants to be done. And then on the Eastern Conference side, it's so bunched up. Milwaukee's been looking at Jay Crowder forever. And I don't understand this. As much as everybody hates Grayson Allen's a really good fit with the Bucks. They've been shopping him a lot. But if you're shopping him, you're looking for a guy like Eric Gordon that can come in, really easily shoot the 3, and be a good veteran presence in the locker room. Like every year now, they've picked up Ibaka or guys like that come in. Joel Ingles this year comes in, not going to rock the boat.
PJ Tucker,
but you know what?
Too long ago,
can make
right?
exactly and can make your team better. I think that Milwaukee's a team that's probably going to try and do something because they know they're teetering right there with Boston for the best in the East. I think Philly might look to do something more to add one more piece. And I think that's why Eric Gordon has so much value. Phoenix would love to have Eric Gordon. The Lakers would love to have Eric Gordon. Milwaukee would love to have Eric Gordon. So I think the Rockets could be a 3rd team in a 3-way, or teams that we thought a year or 2 ago, like Phoenix, that were championship contenders, could start just saying, we're selling off our veterans and we're rebooting this thing with Devin Booker. What are you going to give us? And so and Brooklyn could be a key player too, because I don't think Brooklyn was a contender 2 days ago. Brooklyn right now is a pretender right now that is probably at a crossroads thinking, do we rebuild at the end of the year or do we rebuild before the deadline? Yeah. And that's where a lot of these vets that could help may move.
One of the deckheads who joins me all the time and wants to talk Toronto Raptors basketball constantly, and I'm like, Mines, bro, nobody in this chat really gives a shit, but he had an interesting point. With Brooklyn moving Kyrie, does that change the landscape for a team like the Toronto Raptors, who were thought to be sellers, dead set sellers at the trade deadline? Does this open the window for them, or should the Raptors absolutely be looking to sell and start over?
Well, let me ask you this, because The easiest answer to that question is you could set them up and tease them and say the Toronto Raptors hold the keys to the championship for this coming season that's still going on, and get the whoever you're talking about all fired up, and then say because depending on who you trade Siakam to and who you trade Obano to, then they're going to be better teams. But it ain't you, because if you can't tell me that Toronto can beat, I don't think Toronto can beat Brooklyn right now in a 7-game series. But if you want to put Toronto against Boston and Milwaukee and Philadelphia, unless you tell me they can beat one, if not more, of those teams, then they got to be sellers, because this is as far as they've gone with this level of talent. If they trade those guys and get the right pieces in a couple of years, I like Gary Trent Jr. I think that Fred VanVleet is a very underrated, very, very productive point guard. But they don't have enough pieces to do what the rest of the East can do right now.
There you go. Man, this was not only was this the most basketball we've ever talked on Barry on Deck, but it was literally the best basketball talk we've ever had on this show in damn near 3 years.
I hope I get to do it on my show one day.
I love you to death, buddy. So I told the peeps already, plan is you're going to join the show again on Friday. And it's about the same time, about 4 o'clock, 4:15, somewhere in there. We're going to break down the post-trade deadline, what happened, and what to expect for the rest of the year. And we're still planning on doing that, right?
No doubt. Whenever you need me, I'm here. You know that.
Hell yeah. All right. For the people that are new to the show that maybe don't know you and I and our background or whatever, how can they follow you, all the NBA heads that watch this show? How can they keep up with you and the NBA?
Since I think you tweeted it wrong, it's at Pac-Man Joel on Twitter.
I think you
kind of put. I kind of think you did. At least you verbalized that.
I picked it right. It was. Hold on. Let me make sure. Go ahead. Tell them.
Pac-Man Joel on Twitter.
Okay.
That's the easiest way, and then you can follow us when you're not a dickhead. Following Barry on Dick.
The E is very important.
My shirt had it was a misprint. You sent me the wrong one, but noon to 3 on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.
There you go. And they're on Twitch as well. Beast. And it's and I love those guys.
I love the Twitchers. Yeah. They love me. It's a hate relationship. It's absolutely fantastic.
Homie, I appreciate you, man. Tell the wife and kids to say hello, and I will talk to you on Friday.
Ignore my best and the cats. I was going to have Rocky come in and say hi, so you can at least see one of the dogs. Hey, Rock, come here.
Hey,
come here. You'll love this one. Come here, Rock. Come here.
Let me see.
Hang on.
Oh, big boy, you can hear him.
Whoa!
There he goes. Look at that. That's a good boy right there. Rock, what's up, homie?
That's the face right there.
Oh, look at that. That's a good boy. That is a good boy.
He's not spoiled in any way, shape, or form in this house.
Oh, man. All right.
I have to fight for scraps with my dogs thanks to my wife. So
I feel that, bro. I'm like, I tell Nora all the time, I'm like, you pay way more attention to the cats than you do me. She's like, no, I don't, but move over. Oliver's trying to get on the couch. I'm like, okay, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
The answer I don't need is, but babe, they're my babies. Well, then what the hell am I?
I'm my husband. I feel that in my bones. All right, homie. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. That's Joel Blake. Go follow, go listen, and support. And we'll be talking more NBA on Friday. We'll talk to you soon, Joel. Thank you, buddy.
Have a good week, bro.